He gives a nation their pride back. Italy celebrates Ferrari. 11 years after their last triumph, the Scuderia are finally Formula One champions again, and of all places, at the legendary home track Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. His name, Andreas Nicolaus Lauda, known as Niki, one of the best racers of all time. He grew up in Vienna. The upper-class citizens of the Austrian capital live in the village of Putzleinsdorf, as do Lauda's family. Not his world. He dreams of the vast world in a race car. Lauda has to secure a bank as sponsor in order to enter the expensive scene. On the supervisory board of the bank sits his grandfather, and he inhibits the deal. Lauda's dream looks to be crushed. It leads to a dispute. He said, "No, that's exactly what I don't want. I don't want that you drive races. You should study and carry out a normal way of life." It was a discussion of principles with him, where you couldn't change his mindset. And with that came then the breach. He knows that with his small March team, he stands little chance against stars like Jacky Ickx or Stewart.
Niki was a very promising driver. Everybody knew at the time he had and could be a potential winner for the championship.
He was new, and I always thought that Niki was a good driver right from the very beginning, but he wasn't doing anything spectacular at the beginning. But obviously he became a fantastically good racing driver, and with a terrific head for the job.
Lauda is condemned to success, for it's all at stake. The 23-year-old has to run himself deep into debt. The enormous pressure grows, for he has no chance against the top teams, and he drives in the back. But it gets worse. The Austrian team runs into trouble. March went bust at the end of the year. The whole team was gone, with my money. Then, with great effort, I was able to make the transition over to the BRM on another Formula One team, where I was allowed to drive as third driver. And with the BRM, it was as such that in Monte Carlo, I drove around in third position, in front of Jacky Ickx. That was the Ferrari driver at the time. That then prompted Enzo Ferrari to talk with me, and then to sign me up for the Ferrari team a year later.
Ferrari was not successful at all in '73. I know it because I was in the team. We were last all the time and so on. If you compare the Formula One today and Ferrari in those days, it's not the same planet. You know, a Formula One team was maybe 8 people in those days, including the truck driver.
The traditional brand finds itself in trouble. Claims and performance from Ferrari differ widely. These are chaotic days in 1973, and the cars are bad. And I can remember when I was allowed to test the Ferrari for the first time in Fiorano. What was this weird thing? This is understeered. This is oversteered. It isn't balanced. It's just slow. The pragmatic Lauda and the proud red from Maranello. The differences between the two couldn't be greater. Niki Lauda has a plan. With his cool style, he wants to prevail against all odds. Niki separated himself rather quickly from the legends and said, "I have to take the opportunity from Ferrari and use them to my best advantage. I have to test more than all the others. I have to develop more than all the others. I have to make better use of the larger budget from Ferrari than the others can, and in that way, achieve victories. and Niki was able to do just that.
Well, Niki has always been extremely precise in his desire and the way he wanted things.
In Maranello, only one man is in charge, Enzo Ferrari. All decisions must be approved by the founder of the brand. He was unbelievably charismatic, Italian, tough personality, let's say. No one was allowed to mutter a negative word about Ferrari. As a driver, certainly not. And the first impression of this Ferrari, after the first round in Fiorano in late '73, was a catastrophe. Ferrari comes and watches how I drive with the car for the first time. And I get out of the car and say to his son, who translates, "This is a catastrophe, there's no balance, this car is shit." Lauda demanded changes to make the Ferrari a few tenths of a second faster. He said to me, "If you aren't half of a second faster, then we're done." The pressure was there. We were then 8/10ths faster. With that, we crossed over the first hurdle. There was acknowledgement from Enzo Ferrari. And from that day, the work collaboration actually went quite well. Coinciding with the start of a great career, his past catches up with him again. Lauda doesn't need a lot of time. He ponders briefly, then makes a decision. He does not forgive his grandfather. He died then suddenly. I didn't go to his funeral as the situation at the time was so tense and negative. If you were to ask me today, it would have been more sensible to, at least before his death, give him my hand and reconcile. But at that time, it wasn't possible. Lauda prevails with Ferrari. Finally, he seems to have reached the goal line of fulfilling his greatest dream. He transforms the team, professionalizes all sectors. The groundwork for future success has been laid out. 1975 will be the racer Niki Lauda's year. Already since the second-to-last race, no one has been able to catch him. Niki Lauda in the Ferrari, and with that, all of Italy becomes world champion. He is no longer the awkward newcomer.
As a friend, I like Niki. But as a driver, he was very good and obviously proved that. So he's one of the top racing drivers in the world, without doubt. He's won also 3 world championships. And I know, Niki's a good man.
In the next season, Lauda is already considered one of the favorites. Team and car are working. But he has new competition from England. The charismatic James Hunt will deliver a duel with Lauda that remains today as one of the most exciting the Formula One has ever seen. A former colleague reminisces. James was always the big zampano when it came to women. Hunt, a showman. Already legendary, continuously changing female partners. Outside of the racetrack, the good-looking Brit takes everything life has to offer. He behaved in such a way that you thought, "Really, James?" I often said to him, "What are you talking about?" At times, it was a bit of a shame because it was simply provocative. If I were invited to the Royal House in Windsor, and then arrive in a tuxedo top with jeans and tennis shoes with my toes sticking out, the front cut out, that doesn't go over well with the people there. You won't be invited back because they say, "What is this? What kind of statement is that?" It's a bit of a pity that he had to do that. It's nonsense. One can say free spirit. No, it was provocative, unpleasant. Style was also unpleasant. He's repeatedly involved in accidents. His style is criticized as being way too risky. For his team, McLaren, a costly affair. But one wants to see victories. James Hunt. He likes to celebrate. The sunny boy image fits to the marketing strategy. He's idolized, even though he never proved any consistent top qualities as a driver. Lauda and Hunt, two different life paths.
Herzlich würde ich nicht sagen, aber ein Respekt.
Cordial I wouldn't say, but a mutual respect, absolutely. Because James was the same kind of guy as me. As people, we weren't enemies.
Vom menschlichen her waren wir uns keine Gegner in dem Sinne.
The 1970s. The sport of racing is as dangerous as ever. It leaves its mark on Hunt.
I don't want to die, and it's a source of it's a steady source of worry to me. You know, it's the one cloud on the sunny horizon of my life.
Lauda suppresses such thoughts professionally. It's the races that count, nothing else. And he knows that with this, he places a heavy burden on his wife, Marlene. Marlene didn't know at all the kind of dangers we were putting ourselves in, because they see it all from the outside. There are some lunatics driving race cars, but no one is confronted with the risks. The 1st of August, 1976, Nurburgring, the most dangerous track in the world. On this day, the life of Niki Lauda will change profoundly. Every year we were confronted with 1 or 2 deaths. The risk that we had to undertake at that time, you had to think about that beforehand. Do I want to take that risk? Everyone who participated in this extreme sport knew I could die. That was a clear decision that one had to take at the time. Thank God, it's not that way anymore. But the insecurity about slamming into something was so high at the time that you had to take it into account. A short time later, nothing is as it was before. From the force of impact, the car hurtles across the road. It burns. Also involved, Hans-Joachim Stuck. Your thoughts, it's like tunnel vision, in which you do what you intuitively think is best, whether it's right or not. In my head, I thought, there are still cars coming, I'll warn them. Lauda is in critical condition. His lungs are severely injured. They wanted to drive with the ambulance from the site of the crash up through the rest of the Nurburgring and then back down to Adenau. And there, where the accident was, just 1 kilometer before it, was the Breitscheid exit, which puts you in the middle of town. I said to the ambulance driver, look, there are no more cars coming. All the cars are sitting there, radios on high. Drive on the shoulder against the driving direction. And they were there in the hospital 10 minutes later. For sure, with all the traffic, I saved him an hour's driving time, and they could start with the aspiration of the lungs earlier. The fight to save Niki Lauda's life begins. Surviving. The first question was, alive or dead? I can remember exactly that I saw myself liberated, flying backwards into a deep hole, and I thought that was it. And then I immediately began to think about what the doctor was saying. Listened, engaged myself, in order not to let myself fall into this lethargic death.
Eben nicht in diese, sage ich jetzt einmal, Todeslethargie mich fallen zu lassen.
And that was the right decision. And the doctors did everything correctly. The lungs were my main problem. I slowly started to come back and was able to fully recover. But I'll never forget that moment, where it was really close to the edge.
Wo es eben wirklich knapp an der Grenze war.
The race was restarted, customary in these times, and Hunt wins. The treatment, especially the lungs, means agonizing pain for Lauda. He must fight insanely hard. Today all the pains are completely masked out. I know that I once had them, but when you ask me now, it's not a bother anymore. Because the most important thing, with or without pain, was to survive. Monza. Just 42 days after the accident, he's back. Someone like Niki Lauda doesn't give up the fight for the title easily.
His return after his accident at the Nurburgring, I think, was the most courageous thing that I've ever seen.
Motorsport leaves its mark, physically and psychologically, and every driver handles these near-death experiences differently.
I can make the comment that burns are the most terrible wound you can have in an accident. A bone, it's okay, everything okay, but burning, it's really not pleasant. And I'm sure Niki told you that.
Lauda places fourth in Monza. Hunt falls out. The duel goes on.
I was beside him when he took his helmet off at the end of the race and he was just bleeding. There was no skin left, you know, because the vibrations of the helmet on the car, it was a great effort by him to do that.
At the foot of the volcano in Fuji, Japan, the last race. On this day, the title will be decided, Lauda or Hunt. The course is flooded. The drivers protest.
Then
came the unbelievable announcement from the race director. Everything had been stopped, but he said, "Now we'll start the race." I was the driver's spokesperson at the time and said, "Why now?" He said, "It's the first race that will be broadcast worldwide on television, and we have to transmit it. Because at 6, it will be dark, and we can't miss out on this experience, cost what it may." At the end of the second round, Lauda suddenly parks his car. He feels the risks are too great. This rational decision could cost him the title. It was the right decision for this situation. I still stand by it today. If I were to be driving today, I would do the same, because the situation is so perverse that commercial rights decide over a flooded course. Lauda is already on the way to the airport when the rain subsides. Bad luck? Now a fifth-place finish is sufficient for James Hunt. In the chaos of the race, the Brit loses track of the situation. At first, James Hunt thought he hadn't won. He was super mad at his team and grumbled about, until I said, "You're world champion, you dunce." He said, "I'm world champion?" That was a very special atmosphere. And afterwards, he went crazy. And then came sake and everything else liquid. Niki Lauda and James Hunt. They'll never be best friends, but the mutual respect runs deep. Lauda accepts what he cannot change, and now the next world champion title is on his agenda. A great assist is his ability to focus to the bitter end, black or white. His second world champion title with Ferrari, There's no other goal. Finally, on September 11, 1977, he accomplishes it in Italy. His opponent, James Hunt, lacks consistency. He looks for fun elsewhere. But then something happens that also Niki Lauda can't control, and he has to make a difficult decision. Somehow the emotion was gone. That the Ferrari car was better than all the others at that time, that was clear. But somehow, all the emotions that I had had over the 4 years of driving with them, they were somehow neutralized. The positive emotion. And the emotion that remained was neutral. And when something went wrong, it was double as bad. It wasn't working anymore. Like in a marriage. And therefore, I chose to leave. He switched to the Brabham Racing team. Team manager is Bernie Ecclestone. But the new beginning and fresh motivation that he had hoped for weren't there. I drove out of the pit, had endless discontent. I exhorted myself. Drive on. Contract is signed, enjoy it. But I couldn't resolve the problem. Was then in the pit, had the pressure in the tires checked so that I could have time to think. Then I drove out again and thought, nix, done, the end. I got out of the car, said thanks, and I retired. James Hunt is never able to return to his previous successes. He then retires from motorsport the same year as Lauda. 2 careers that couldn't have been more different. I tried with all my strength to reach my goals in a pragmatic and correct manner. And he achieved the same, with 100 women along the way. Porsche testing site in Weissach. At the beginning of the 80s, the Stuttgart manufacturer wants Team McLaren to coin a new turbo era in the Formula One. In the search for suitable drivers who can fulfill the high expectations, Team McLaren has struck it big. Niki Lauda can't help himself. There I had the first test drive with McLaren, and I then decided to come back to the sport. For Team McLaren, Lauda is a godsend. He has the ability to drive fast and to develop the team through his example, and to help his colleagues.
Niki was for sure the man who gave me something. He brought me a lot. With the experience of Niki, having been world champion already, having a different philosophy, I was doing a lot of sport. I was really trained physically very well, and Niki was like this and did not look very fit, and we had some very difficult races. And very often I said, oh, it's warm and he's going to be tired, or it's going to be... No, it was always there, because at the end it's also in the head, and I learned a lot about that.
Lauda leads the team on the track. He's someone whom you can rely on. At the end of the 1984 season, 2 years after his returning to the sport, Lauda becomes world champion for a 3rd time.
Coming back and winning again the World Championship, that was impressive.
Alain Prost loses the World Championship by half a point.
I remember very well the party that we had together after the race. That was really something that I would never forget in my life. That is a big proof that we had fun, and we had a fantastic relation.
Niki Lauda ends his unparalleled career in 1985. He had achieved everything that he had wanted to in racing, and now looks after his airline that he established years ago. James Hunt is the tragic hero of this story. He continues on living his excessive life, to the edge and beyond.
Dass diese Reise von ihm dann leider
This trip of his then went unfortunately south, because you can't maintain a racer performance when you're so destroyed.
Wenn du dich aus dem Auto heraus derart vernichtest.
Trank zu viel.
He drank too much, and maybe he also took too many drugs. I remember still that he was working for the BBC and was completely bankrupted. I crossed paths with him in London and helped him out and gave him money. And then I held this discussion with him. You're going to pull yourself together now or you'll be dead. And he did just that. That was the great thing, that he completely turned himself around, totally healthy, never drank anything nor did anything else, had actually fully come back to the world, and then, unfortunately, completely unnecessarily succumbed to a heart attack. Today, Niki Lauda works as a co-interviewer during German TV broadcasts and for the Silver Arrow team of Mercedes. He's now in his second marriage. The restless pragmatic has become calmer, and he knows who he has to thank for that: his first wife. Today we have the best relationship. Birgit, my current wife, also. That all went incredibly well, only because of her personality. That she understood everything, went through it, respected it, and accepted it. Niki Lauda stayed true to himself. He and his rival James Hunt were lead actors in the most dramatic season of Formula One history. Lauda senses that he won't be able to keep up with his title-hungry colleagues in the following season. 1985 is finally the year of Alain Prost.
He had that smoothness, he had that deliberation, he knew when to go and when not to go.
Alain Prost has matured. He's profited from his good relationship with Lauda.
When I was losing a race on Sunday, I was really, disappointed. I learned a lot with Niki that said, okay, come with me. I went in a nightclub, have a nice drink, and forget everything. And it looks stupid, but at the end, I really had a sort of a different attitude, winning or losing, and that helped me a lot since '84. And in '85, because of that, I really concentrated my season to be world champion, not trying to win every race, At least 2 or 3 times. I really thought that it was better to finish 4th rather than having a risk and get some points for the championship. And I was, at least for the first time, world champion.
Prost, one of the most successful and fastest drivers of the Formula One, began his unparalleled career in small go-karts. But the Frenchman would have become associated with something much different. His era coincides with another driver regarded as the fastest driver of all time. Prost's driving skills often stand in the shadow of Ayrton Senna.
Ayrton Senna was sometimes faster, but he didn't drive like Prost. For me, Alain Prost would be me being an observer of Formula One from my retirement, looking at it, I would put Prost as the best driver I've seen.
Prost and Senna, more than opponents. It was characterized by, at the end it was characterized by personal hatred. One couldn't personally look each other in the eye. So much had to be done to the other that it was truly the closest enemy that one saw when looking at the other person. The years with Senna. For the media, it means exciting headlines. The Formula One finally had some fire again, also outside of the racetrack. It polarizes, much to the detriment of Alain Prost.
If they were cheering for Ayrton, they would hate you. But when I say hate, it's really is the right word. So it was really, really difficult. In your private life too, it was really difficult. I really suffer a lot about that. Still today, the image of his forever opponent clings to the mind of Prost.
Their story actually started out rather friendly. At the beginning of his Formula One career, Senna fully concentrates on victories and soon earns respect. He was simply unbelievably talented and knew exactly how it worked. He made his mistakes and learned from them. Iron will and an almost unshakable faith in God. These are his strengths. His driving style, spectacular and ruthless. He becomes polarized. In his hometown, on the other hand, he enjoys the support of the entire population. And also at the racing tracks around the world, it revolves mostly around him. Hardly anyone could resist his personality. He simply had charisma.
Ayrton was very much a seat-of-the-pants driver. He drove, of course, with his head, but nothing like the same head as a Prost, for example. And he would take risks that another man wouldn't, or he would do things that other drivers wouldn't.
Alain Prost experiences the heyday of his career. He is the star. It must be decided who will race with him. In retrospect, Prost doubts his recommendation. He brought an opponent into the team who made things uncomfortable.
They wanted to take Nelson Piquet in a team. And I said myself, why you want to take Nelson Piquet? It looks like the best is Ayrton Senna. Maybe it was my mistake.
And Senna doesn't thank Prost. He has a huge ego, and he shows it. When he came into the room, everyone looked. Without him saying a word, there was a completely charismatic, strong personality that could drive cars insanely well. These characteristics also Prost does not dispute.
When I was racing against Ayrton, you could not imagine and believe how difficult it was for me to be in France.
The introverted Frenchman has distanced himself from his homeland. He's not regarded as being very patriotic. The French media and the public opinion often side with Senna. Loyalty to the countryman is rare. Alain Prost is not only isolated, he faces frequent opposition.
We are a country of 50-50, and you have 50% of the people you love you, and in this case, 50% of the people, they hate you, but they really hate you.
In 1989, these two worlds collide. Senna is obsessed with winning at all costs. Team agreements do not fit in with his philosophy of racing.
We always had, when we were in the first row together, we always had a sort of agreement that we would not fight before the first corner, and that happened in Imola. And I did a better start, and look in the mirror, I said, okay, I took my line, and then he overtook me. I did not expect that he would overtake me. And 3 days later, I was really furious. We were in a small truck with Ron Dennis and Joe Ramirez, and we were talking about that. And he said, but it's not me who has overtook Alain. It's Alain who has overtook me. I said, what do you say? You have 700 million people looking on TV. If you want to look at the... And we had to show the video. It was really an unbelievable situation. And that was Ayrton.
A journalist publishes the story. Senna calls Prost a traitor. The two no longer speak to one another. At the world champion deciding season finale in Suzuka, they collide with one another. Senna is later disqualified. Prost is world champion. And that is the beginning of a hostility that puts to shame everything else that the Formula One has seen so far. Rivalries, yes, Fights, yes. But a relentless animosity like that between Senna and Prost had never existed before. 1990, back in Suzuka, Senna becomes world champion because he pushes Prost off the track.
To do what he has done in Suzuka is really unbelievable, because the philosophy behind is really difficult to understand, but also the risk that you also take for yourself is really big. And he did not care about that. You know, it was really, that was my biggest problem. It was at one stage I realized, how can I fight with the same arms, guns, you know, with a guy thinking that he has God with him, and he always thinks that he is right. We could see the telemetry because he was flat, nothing moved, and if you are a racing driver and you know what that means, you know, to stay flat before the fast corner just to hurt somebody, it is something that is really difficult to understand.
Sometime later, Senna admits that his maneuver in Suzuka was intentional. It doesn't hurt his image. Senna is untouchable. He's simply different. After 2 years with Ferrari, Prost switches to the top team Williams in order to secure his 4th world champion title. Before the season ends, Prost announces his retirement. And then something happens at the last race that Alain Prost did not expect.
After I retired, and the way Ayrton changed completely in 1 minute on the podium in Adelaide, and slowly we came almost like friends, you know, really friends, because I understood. He did not want to be the first, he wanted to beat me, for sure. And when I retired, it was completely different. And that was the best part of the story, you know.
Imola, the 3rd race of the 1994 season. Motorsport will be forever changed during these days. That was one of the worst weekends ever for racing, for me personally as well. On Saturday, the Austrian Roland Ratzenberger has a deadly crash. Before, Rubens Barrichello barely survived a serious accident. The events make Senna reflect. We brought it to his attention after Ratzenberger and Barrichello that he as head driver had to get more involved with issues of safety, to which he said, he didn't have any time. I then said, but you have to, because you're the only one who's credible and can do it. And to that he said, I was actually right. On Sunday's race day, Ayrton Senna has a deadly crash in the Tamburello curve. The doctors fight in vain to save the 3-time world champion's life. The exact cause of the accident remains unknown. More than 1 million Brazilians come to the funeral service in Sao Paulo from all over the country. The government announces 3 days of national mourning. It was a mixture between a state funeral and a sport funeral, and you can see that the whole world had lost an idol. A memorial service becomes a demonstration. A land torn apart, united in their belief in good. They cry because he's dead. They celebrate that he lived. To this day, Senna is more than a legend. Senna is Brazil.
The whole country was in mourning because he was the national hero. For somebody to be taken away, for someone to be killed, then it's an even bigger issue. And, you know, it was a very difficult and sad day.
Brazil is in a deep economic crisis. Senna, as the Brazilians say, gave them their pride back. It's hard to describe. He was a person who was able to bring joy to the people. He was a hero in a land where there were no heroes.
he wrote a part of the history of Formula One that would maybe never happen again. I was a competitor, I was a teammate, and I became a friend. What best? You know, nothing.
They dominate the Formula One headlines since 2014. Nico Rosberg against Lewis Hamilton. It was definitely a great duel, and it will continue to be a great duel. And it's then completely normal that there's also friction. And sometimes it's easier and sometimes harder, especially when it's within the team. That's also a great challenge because when you're fighting against an opponent who's driving for another team, I think that's a little easier or different. But within your own team, that's difficult. Friends have long since become opponents. The road to the title has heavily strained the relationship.
We've known each other for a long, long time, and it's not easy being in a championship battle like we had this year.
The things you do together, you do them, but otherwise you go your own way. It's completely normal. It's not just like that between Nico and Lewis, it's like that between everyone who's competing against each other at the highest level. Two drivers, two egoists, one goal. Only one can be world champion. These are two different people, both equally strong in the car and simply interesting to observe. Hamilton's father makes his career possible, enduring many hardships.
My dad had 4 jobs at one stage to keep us racing. When I was 8, he bought me a go-kart, a very, very old go-kart. He resprayed it and he rebuilt it to make it look like it was new. We won the first 6 races we did, and then we just kept going. We kept winning, we kept winning championships.
Nico Rosberg's situation was much different. Born in Wiesbaden, the German inherited the sport of racing from the cradle. His father, Keke Rosberg, celebrates his biggest victory in 1982 when he becomes Formula One world champion. Nico and Lewis met one another during their days in go-kart racing. Unfortunately, it's very, very hard to make it into the Formula One, primarily because it's so expensive, and all drivers have to find sponsors or people who will support them, and that's not always easy and doesn't always happen. But of course, having a big name helps. Nico Rosberg still has a rocky road to the Formula One. He has to work hard for everything, as all racers dream of being one of the greats. I was, of course, lucky because of my father and my name. That helped me a lot, helped immensely. Nonetheless, I as well had to win the various stages, or win as many as possible, in order to then make it into the Formula One. The year 2002 is one of the most important in his young career. His fast driving style makes it clear he doesn't only have the name of his Finnish father, Nico Rosberg, also has the talent. He fights for the Formula BMW World Championship, and then victory leaves him hungry for more. That year, I then won the Formula BMW World Championship, and then I had tasted the blood of racing. After his victory, his team has a very special surprise for the 17-year-old. We award you with a test drive in a Formula One BMW Williams car. You're speechless, or? No, you have to get up. Stand up, my friend. The tears aren't sitting there, they're running, ladies and gentlemen. Tears are running over his cheek. Amazing, Nico. Isn't it wonderful? It's amazing, isn't it? You weren't expecting that. That was unbelievable. As a 17-year-old to then go from 140 horsepower to 940. That's what the cars were then. To get in and give full gas. That was here in Barcelona, I can still remember. I came out of the pit lane, pushed the pedal through for the first time, and I thought, this can't be for real. It was unbelievable. It was like a rocket that had been lit on fire. And it was a special moment for me. Rosberg signs with Williams. He's finally reached his goal. the Formula One, where heroes are born, where athletes become superstars, glamour, fame, and money. It's a whole other world. To be one of only 22 people, this is the attraction. In 2007, Lewis Hamilton joins the exclusive club of Formula One drivers. Unlike Rosberg, he has a winning car at his disposal. With McLaren, he wins the World Championship in his second year. The buddies from kart racing still have a good rapport with one another. However, Rosberg cannot keep up with Hamilton's speed. The car doesn't allow it. The German only reaches the podium twice. It was definitely difficult in the beginning because it was a new situation. Up until then, when I brought the performance, I could always win. And now, suddenly in the Formula One, even if I brought a great performance, I had no chance of winning because the car was simply not fast enough. And that took some getting used to. It's not nice, but that's the sport. In tennis, it only matters how your form is on the day. The rackets are more or less the same. In auto racing, it's just a matter of fact that it depends on the car. Therefore, the switch to Mercedes in 2010. The Silver Arrow makes a comeback into the highest class of motorsport. However, Nico Rosberg is not the focus of attention originally. For their comeback, the Stuttgarters brought 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher out of retirement. In the internal team battle, Rosberg often stands in front. In 2013, Rosberg receives not only a new car, but also a new teammate, an old acquaintance.
And it's quite an exciting day for us, the launch of the new car and to be new teammates with Nico. We were just saying how crazy it is because we used to be teammates back in 2000 when we were go-karts.
The difficulty is then to have this duel within the team against my teammate, because first and foremost, I have to think about the team and then the duel with him. It's always a difficult compromise. One's own success always stands above all. Can a team drive out the selfishness of a driver? Absolutely pointless. I have to say, this discussion that we always hear in the press comes from the team manager, who always wants to convince the drivers, drive in the interest of the team. But that simply doesn't work, because the drivers in the Formula One are egoists to the highest degree, which is also very clear. They're only the ones who have success survive. And you cannot say, hey, could you let your teammate have the success today, because that will push the brand? That's rubbish. Internal competition. There's still something playful about it. In 2014, turbo engines returned to the Formula One. The new regulations benefit Mercedes. The Silver Arrows kick off the season incredibly strong. The car, World Championship-esque. The drivers first rejoice with one another. But who will take the title? Hamilton and Rosberg pose this question amongst themselves. The competition doesn't have a chance. In Monte Carlo, Rosberg locks his brakes during qualifying. Hamilton cannot complete the round. The pole position goes to the German. Was the braking maneuver truly an oversight? Hamilton publicly expresses his doubts. Hamilton said after the qualifying, Nico and I are not friends. Which qualifying? Monaco qualifying. That's unsympathetic of him to me, I think. That was at a time of the year where it was, again, more intense. I would go up and down all year. Why should Lewis sit with Nico on a free day and have a coffee? They have other things to do. They're very respectful around one another, but they don't spend their free time together, because that would end the fun of it. They want to battle against one another. The maximum that can be achieved is after the race, you're normal around one another again. That you may be a bit friendly with one another, maybe you go have dinner together, make an appearance somewhere together as a team, but as soon as the race begins, you have to be driving. The ground rule, each before each, goes over your head. Whomever is ahead at the end is the winner. Mercedes doesn't want to give any team order. Both drivers should drive against each other. A decision that leads to Rosberg slashing the tires of Hamilton in Belgium. Neither of the Silver Arrows win the race.
It
was, of course, a racing accident. Absolutely, no argument. Only when two Mercedes cars are driving so predominantly in the lead, then one of the Mercedes stars has to win. Racing accident is clear. If Rosberg had been driving with Vettel or Hamilton or some other driver, it's a racing accident. But when you provoke a racing accident within your own team, in which neither of you win in the end, then the fun stops. For the team, that was the damage. And that's what he was blamed for. You have to. When you're not fighting against a third, but fighting against each other, you have to watch out more. After being significantly reprimanded by management, both drivers finish out the season without any major incidents. At the showdown in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton wins his second world championship. At the end, conciliatory tones are hit.
But for Nico, 100% is not an easy experience, but Nico did an incredible job, and coming up afterwards was incredibly professional. So I think it just showed the respect and the long, long friendship we've had for many, many years. So.
Now we're buddies again.
To do motor racing, you have to be, in a way, very special. There must be something missing somewhere.
Anything that doesn't hum, there's no fun in that. Either it works or it doesn't. There's truly an attempt to surpass normal physical limitations. There's something quite amazing about that. And the technology develops at an increasingly rapid pace. Even today's race car drivers are subject to extreme stresses. When my wife and I first met, she said to me, "But you only have to turn the steering wheel. Why is that so difficult?" But there are enormous G-forces. The seatbelt sits so tightly that I can't breathe correctly. I'm in there so compressed I can't even open my lungs. And it's also extremely hot. I also have my helmet on, so no fresh air comes in. The visor is down, there's only a small opening here underneath. It's always stifling hot inside. And the overalls and also the underwear, it's all soaking wet, nothing breathes. And that's what makes it so difficult. And of course also the tense body position that I have to keep inside the car. I stop breathing at every fast curve because I have to tense up so much in order to be able to drive the car at its limit. I have to dance with the car at its limit. And I can only do that if I maintain a strict position in the car. I can't just be relaxed about it. I have to really stay in position, and that makes everything very stressful. Argentina, 1955. The country has a star in its ranks, a man who will revolutionize the sport of auto racing. More than 100,000 spectators withstand the heat of almost 40 degrees Celsius to watch the race because of him.
When everybody asks me who was the best driver, I say Juan Manuel Fangio.
Fangio has already celebrated success in Europe. Now his being in his home country has become a national affair. Many drivers retire out of exhaustion. Not him. He's Argentinian. He is Fangio.
Fangio, above all, was a gentleman. Fangio was a humble man, He was a fantastic driver, and I can think of never, not once did I ever know him do something that wasn't correct. Now, many drivers I've driven against, I mean, Farina was pretty dirty, but I mean, there were quite a lot that would, you know, they would go over the edge, and I mean, Jack Brabham, so not badly, but they would mess you up with dirt. Fangio never. Absolutely perfect.
The then 26-year-old Hans Hermann was a teammate of Fangio. He still admires him today.
Juan Manuel Fangio war für mich ein...
Juan Manuel Fangio was an incredibly decent person. He was a simple man, but he had an incredible charisma. I can remember one story in particular. In Buenos Aires, at the final practice session, he saw that my tires were worn down, and we only had 10 or 15 minutes of practice time left. He came over to me and told me out of sympathy that I could use his tires for my ride. That's how Fangio was, unbelievably helpful.
So war Fangio, unglaublich hilfsbereit.
Fangio was one of the first people to document the art of driving with a camera, a perfectionist.
I thought Juan Manuel Fangio was the greatest driver that's ever been, even to today. I think the manner in which he went about his life, the way he drove a car, the way he looked after his engineers, the way he chose only to drive the best team with the best engineers and mechanics.
British Grand Prix 1965. Fangio drives the legendary Silver Arrows of Mercedes. His third world championship is only a question of time. This time, everything is different. Fangio doesn't dominate as usual. His British teammate Stirling Moss is in the lead.
When I got round that last corner, I put my foot flat on the floor, I pulled over and I made way to him to go past. I thought, if you go past, then I know you've got more power, but he didn't.
It's the first Grand Prix victory for Moss on home terrain.
Whenever you can win a race, and they play God Save the Queen, and in those days I was very patriotic, and I had the Union Jack on the car, that was a very meaningful thing to me. Luckily, you go around, you do an extra lap while you're cooling off, and you can get the tears out of your eyes. You know, I mean, it's a very emotive time.
However, still today, Moss ponders one question.
I asked him, I said to Juan, did you let me win this race? He said, no, he said, it was your day, you were on form and so on, but he's the sort of man who wouldn't tell me anyway. And he's the man that would know that for Mercedes, this is the British Grand Prix, I'm a British driver, why doesn't he win? I've won the other ones, so it could be. I don't know, I really don't know. It doesn't bother me because he was that great a man.
Fangio is greatly respected outside of his team as well. The Argentine combines domination with modesty. Fangio knows auto racing is not a one-man sport. He always chooses the best mechanics who play an integral role in his success. And Mercedes has great ones. Races are often won in the pits.
You really need the best engineers and the best mechanics. The mechanics I had, I think they were better at what they did than I was at what I did.
A pit stop in the 1950s takes more than 1 minute. Only 2 mechanics are allowed to work on the car. The tires are replaced by hand with a hammer. Mechanics who are part of modern racing teams, such as Red Bull, are under enormous pressure. Their work must be completed within 3 seconds.
It simply is, the fastest stop is the one where you maybe gain 2 or 3 positions. So the pressure has been immense over winter to get equipment correct, get the right people in the right places. So we have been practicing this like a football player played. You know, they have practice every day. We've over winter been, 2 times half an hour in the factory every day, simply to practice pit stops. And it's a routine job. Absolutely, you get all your routines to get 22, 23 people to do everything right within 3 seconds. It's a huge task.
In slow motion, it's clear how harmoniously a team must work together in order to have the tires ready to be sent back out onto the track in less than 3 seconds.
Every detail of the car is important. Each has its own purpose.
There are 800 of us in the factory who work an incredible amount of hours on these 2 race cars. Then there are the people who come to work on the engine. They make up an additional few hundred. It's unbelievable, the whole organization that's behind it, and everyone has their part. Each is responsible for a part of the car, and everything must fit together perfectly. Only then can you win races, and every millimeter counts. If the spoiler was wrongly mounted by a millimeter, it would definitely drive slower. This being the case, it's truly the search for perfection. After 2 years, Mercedes pulls out of the Formula One. Fangio wins 8 of the 12 Grand Prix races during his time with the Stuttgart manufacturer. The Argentine continues on for 2 more years with Maserati and Ferrari. For each, he is crowned with an additional World Championship title. The champion then retires to his hometown. As the president of Mercedes Argentina, he represents his country in South America until his death in 1995. The admiration from his colleagues does not apply only to his professional career.
Fangio could always do what was necessary, and to me he was like a father, really.
To me, he was the driver, but also the human being. Fangio is regarded as a national hero.
I went to the funeral of Fangio. Now, Fangio hadn't driven a racing car since the 50s, and yet the respect that he had was just enormous.
Fangio remains unforgotten, an idol as driver and as human being. But there are others in the 1970s who seek much different challenges far from their hometown. That you have to be a bit crazy, that's helpful if you want to drive fast cars. But if you have to think, it won't work. If it doesn't happen intuitively, it won't work. And therefore I think for those who really have to learn it, they'll eventually hit their limit. Walter Röhrl, perhaps the best rally driver of all time. In 1974, he celebrates his first big success with Opel, the European Championships. His driving talent is paired with strict discipline and strong determination. Racing is a sport.
I
think I had the advantage that I already realized at that time that conditioning and an athletic lifestyle were needed in auto racing. It was a time when the Scandinavians were completely dominating the sport. And they definitely lived from their talent, since they had 6 months of snow or 6 months of gravel. But everything else in life they didn't take so seriously. They liked to drink. They liked to go out at night. And that was the key. I was incredibly in shape. You can't compare it with today's world. I sat for 40 hours at the steering wheel, and that's when you notice the importance of conditioning. In 1982, it comes down to the most spectacular duel in rallying history. Walter Röhrl against Michel Mouton. Man against woman. Her Audi race car with the new Quattro technology is superior to Röhrl's Opel. Röhrl's advantage? He's relaxed. I think the difference was I didn't want to win the World Championship. I once said, being a one-time world champion is already too much. Things then began to blow up with Michel over the course of the year. In West Africa, it comes to a showdown on the Ivory Coast. I was more or less forced into it by Opel. It's all about the World Championship now, and you have to go. After going around in circles for weeks, we came to a compromise that I would not go to the practice, that my co-driver would go alone. I said I would fly in on the start day, and I would fly back out 2 hours after the finish. I didn't want to spend one unnecessary minute in the country, as I was afraid that I would get stung by something or would eat something bad, and therefore I went relaxed. I said, okay, I don't have to win. It's not so important to me. It's important to Opel, apparently, but not so much to me. And that simply makes it, like everything else in life, when you don't put pressure on yourself, it makes it all the much easier. The climatic conditions are an extreme stress to man and to material. The mud and the heat are a great discomfort to the driver and the cars. But Röhrl maintains his Bavarian composure. An hour after the start, my car broke down with rear-end damage. The journalists all came to me and were waiting for me to rage, but I said, eventually we'll continue on. There's 5,000 kilometers. It's a long way. It can still work out. And in that relaxed manner is how we dealt with the issue. Röhrl's decision is spot on. His Opel Ascona starts up once again, whereas the French driver Michel Mouton falls out. Her Audi could not withstand the extreme conditions. Röhrl becomes a two-time world champion in 1980, a triumph that makes him reflective, for he is a fair sportsman. When I look back on it today, I feel bad. It would have been much nicer if Michel had won. It would have been a unique moment in history. For me, it was nothing. That's the unjust thing about it. She suffered, whereas becoming world champion again meant more or less nothing to me. For me, there was only one thing in life, Monte Carlo. Nothing else mattered. Rally racing during these times. Monster motors that demand everything from the driver, under the most extreme conditions in all areas of the world. Therefore, the co-driver is very important. He knows every inch of the track. Walter Röhrl manages to achieve something quite incredible. He wins the World Championship 4 times, each time with a different car. A daredevil with a lot of heart. Stirling Moss, another daredevil who never wins the World Championship, yet still becomes a legend. With one single victory. The Brit has his largest success in the 1950s with Mercedes. He's a teammate of Fangio, but always stands in the Argentine's shadow. However, Moss could do it all. To me, Stirling Moss was, during that time, the perfect race driver. He had the skills, whether it was an endurance race or a short race, or a formula, or motor racing or sports car racing. He was always excellent.
The one thing I had was I was versatile enough to be able to drive in different cars and so on. But the ultimate of driving, really, I think, is probably Formula One if one's talking precision.
Moss was born in London in 1929 and discovered his passion for racing early on. He signs up for a private team, much to the dismay of his father, a dentist, who doesn't regard racing as a career. Moss feels comfortable behind every wheel and doesn't care how long the race is. He therefore takes part in the 24-hour race in Le Mans in 1952 and takes an early lead. A technical defect on his car forces him to retire, a fate that becomes a common theme in his career. But Moss has perseverance and ambition, and he loves danger.
There are two types of driver, the quick and the dead, and if you're not careful, do the same thing.
For him, it goes without saying to always drive at the limit during races, even though it can be life-threatening at times, even more so than today. Race cars at that time, rolling gas bombs.
Wir saßen in Rennboliden voll.
We sat in the race car, full of gas, no seatbelts on, like how I'm sitting here. Short sleeve shirt, an odd cap as helmet. At the start line, the thoughts were often, and not just with me, who will it be today? That means, please, not me. Maybe the person in front of you, or beside you, or behind you. We raced from that perspective.
Gesichtspunkten sind wir Rennen gefahren.
Even more astonishing, the mindset of Moss. For him, the possibility of death is the draw of the sport.
The emasculation of our sport, the making of racing safer, I think really takes away a tremendous ingredient that to me was important. I didn't want to get hurt, but the knowledge that I could get hurt meant that the danger that I was combating was made to feel, it gave me a greater exhilaration.
What I can accept very well is the kind of risk that you're taking by yourself, going into a fast corner and, for example, the old Silverstone, where you had very, very fast corners at 250 kilometers, and you know that if you do a mistake by yourself, you have a big risk because you cannot escape. That's the kind of risk I'm ready to take because it's my control. And I can understand what Stirling Moss was saying about that.
I don't know anybody who was excited about the idea of doing the sport because it was dangerous. I think the basic idea is to be one of the best, if not the best. The basic idea is to have a large ego and to be the winner of a Grand Prix. The pleasure comes from the fact that you have been the best. But the fact that it's dangerous, definitely not.
In the mid-50s, motorsport experienced a sort of resurrection. The cars became more sophisticated and faster. Just the thing for Stirling Moss. He now drives Formula One for Maserati, with reasonable success. Again and again, he must park the car due to technical difficulties. However, a man who wants to put together the best team in the world has Moss in sight. His name, Alfred Neubauer, from Mercedes.
When Mercedes came back in '54, that is the team because first of all they had Neubauer running it, who's a man what everybody knew about. They had a great car and Fangio. Those are the three things that were so important to me because I have a passion for driving and to drive with a team where they give you the car and the freedom to drive as hard as you can, to me was what I love because I'm a racer, I'm not just a driver, and I love to race.
And sure enough, the silver arrows race everything into the ground. Though Moss also has the best team on his side, as well as the best driver.
With a Mercedes, if you didn't go off the road, you won unless Fangio was there.
Together they established the era of the silver arrows, an era that remains unforgotten today. Without a doubt, I'm very proud to be a silver arrow driver, especially because of the history behind them. I mean, the silver arrows are legendary in the world of racing, and the other drivers who drove the cars before me. All the big names, Fangio, Stirling Moss, they're legends themselves, and that's truly special. The combination of perfect cars and team tactics on the one hand, and excellent drivers on the other, unbeatable.
Moss und ich, wir waren gleich.
Moss and I were alike. We were young, boisterous boys, and we were a really good team. We got along well, and that, thank God, is how Stirling Moss and I still are today.
Und das ist Gott sei Dank mit Stirling Moss, der ja auch noch da ist, bis heute so.
And then came the day of all days for Stirling Moss, May 1955, the Mille Miglia in Italy. A tough sports car race that demands all that Moss loves: endurance, exertion, and exceeding the limit.
There are things you don't get in Formula One that you do in sports cars. I mean, Fangio, I know, didn't like not seeing his wheels. It doesn't worry me one bit. I don't look at the wheels anyway. So it's horses for courses, and drivers are different. But at least I feel that I could go from one to another, and it didn't make too much difference.
His co-driver is Dennis Jenkinson. For the first time in history, he puts together a road book. He knows the track inside and out. Stirling Moss starts at 7:22, in exactly the manner the Mercedes team had expected.
Wir wussten, dass Moss ziemlich scharf gleich losgeht.
We knew that Moss would come out of the gate strong. We calculated that when we came to the stretch to Bologna, where there's only a straightaway and emergency braking, that we would then get past Moss. But things turn out differently. While Moss leads the field at a murderous pace, the race comes to an end for his colleague Hans Hermann due to technical damage. The fuel cap ripped open and gas poured over us. At first it was pleasant, it was cool. Thank God something was cooling us off. But my co-driver was thinking way ahead. He was already standing on the seat and no longer sat, as it would have only taken a spark, and we would have been a burning torch. I looked at the back quickly to see if it was already burning, and I got a gush of gasoline in my eyes. I couldn't see anything and remained clinging to a rock. Thank God there were no jumping sparks. And by the time the car came to a complete stop, my co-driver was no longer in it. He jumped out right away. Unfortunately, that was the end of the race for us.
Das Rennen war für uns dann leider dazu.
The split times of Moss and Jenkinson already surmise that this will be a victory for the ages. From a true team.
I completely relied on him. He was so good that I knew my life was in his hands, and vice versa. That when he said flat out, I was flat out, and that was it.
When Moss is the first to cross the finish line, the audience can hardly believe what they're seeing. For the 1,000 miles, he needed only 10 hours and clocked an average speed of 157 kilometers per hour. Never again will someone drive the track as fast as Moss. Joy and disappointment lie close together. It's actually the one race, and I've been to a lot of races, where I'm still sad today that it didn't work out.
It was probably, I suppose, one of my best races, yes.
After flying high in Italy, Le Mans is up next. Moss is to drive together with Fangio. Hans Hermann has recently had an accident during training and is out. As a result, Mercedes engages Frenchman Pierre Levesque as substitute, a man of the old school. Le Mans is extreme. The spectators, roughly 100,000, stand close to the track. Safety margins? None. Moss and Fangio are quick to take the lead. It could be their race. The main competitor is Jaguar. The British team want to prevent a German victory at all cost, being only 10 years since World War II. The team from the island admits this later on. It comes down to a duel between the two racing teams. It's 6:26 p.m. on July 11, 1955. Levesque races off into the crowd of spectators. The exact cause of the accident is never fully clarified. Whether a Jaguar driver is at fault, speculation remains. 84 people died, among them Pierre Levesque. Whether Levesque could have prevented the accident, Stirling Moss weighs in.
I think it's one of those things that one can't say because it depends on the driver. I remember seeing Fangio at Monaco when there was a big accident. He gets through it, and he's done that many times. And I think if it had been Fangio back there, probably there wouldn't have been the accident.
Mercedes pulls their team out. The race goes on. Moss loses his only chance to win Le Mans.
I think it was a bad decision. I think it was the wrong decision because it didn't do any good. And it made some people think, well, maybe they have a conscience, a guilty conscience, it was their mistake. There was something to do with our cars, which was nothing to do with them.
During the night, it quickly becomes clear the British will wrap up the race.
Jaguar went on and won the race, which really was our race, but that's motor racing.
Moss finishes out the season. And in 1955, the era of the Silver Arrows comes to an end. Mercedes pulls out of motorsport completely. Moss remains as brand ambassador to the Stuttgart firm. Although Moss never became a world champion, he's more popular in England than his compatriot Mike Hawthorne, who did in fact win the title. Due to his crazy driving practices, Moss gave away many victories. Sometimes he didn't plan out the race well. He was too wild. Still in the last lap, he wanted to drive the fastest lap and then would fall out. That means he would have actually won multiple world championships.
The most important race I ever did in my life was the one today. Because today I can be killed, today I can win. Last week's gone, next week hasn't arrived. So today's what matters. And the of course I'd like to be world champion. I must admit, when I lost the world championship, the first time I was very, very disappointed because I felt I was better than the guy who won it. And the second time I was disappointed, and probably the third. But when I look back, I don't mind. To me, and I console myself with the fact there's an exclusivity for being somebody who never did win it, but some people think I should have done. That's wonderful. I'm not a year. You can't sort of say, well, was it 59 or 57 or 50 or 60? I'm not a year. So that's my philosophical way, or my easygoing way of getting over it.
In 1962, Moss has to end his career. He severely injures himself in an accident. Racing is no longer an option. He lies in a coma for a month. In 2000, he's exalted to peerage by Prince Charles. He is now Sir Stirling Moss.
I now often think back to when my father was saying, look, you can't make money at motor racing, and I often like to think back, well, you know, Dad, he'd be quite proud, I think, because now I managed to sell my time. I make my business by selling my time, and I'm not even driving, really. I race when I can, but it's been a wonderful life. I can think of no other life that I, as a person, could have gone into that would have given me the exhilaration and the love and the passion of what I was doing. There were heartbreaks, yes, sure, of course there are. I mean, a lot of my friends unfortunately died. There were times when I got hurt, but overall, my thought and my feeling of it is one of I can't think of a better life.
Hans Hermann continues racing. Commissioned by various manufacturers, he wants to achieve another great victory. Absolutely nothing should stand in his way. He survives this accident on the Avus virtually unharmed. Change of scene. Until 1986, the so-called Group B is the elite class of rally sport. The cars have enormous horsepower, and most have all-wheel drive. And again, accidents with tragic consequences occur. Spectators are killed. In international rallying, it's not just about car driving. It's a marketing campaign on almost every continent. The race cars are deliberately exposed to the greatest of difficulties. No extreme is too big in order to prove that you build the best cars. For the drivers, this means always be on the limit in the battle for seconds, and in most cases, a lack of safety precautions. But it's a great adventure that lasts almost an entire year. Between gravel, mud, and snow, they experience the most beautiful places on our planet. Meanwhile, the cars have become so strong and fast that steering and braking alone is not enough. Walter Röhrl has a much greater knowledge. He has a photographic memory. If you want to drive with 535 horsepower and your co-driver doesn't know exactly what's ahead, forget it. And that was a great advantage. That with me, the film played out, and it was all a confirmation of what my co-driver had read to me. The project Group B ends in 1986. It's too dangerous, too extreme, essentially irresponsible. Group A is introduced. The engines throttled, the craziness kept to a minimum. Pikes Peak in Colorado, 1987. An extreme mountain race. Just the right thing for Walter Röhrl. When I got there for the first time, I started up slowly. My wife was stupidly still around at the time and was always telling me how dangerous it was, and at some point I believed her. I thought, you better know what you're doing, because if you drive just a little into the ditch, you're 500 meters deeper. That doesn't need to happen. But on the day of the competition at the starting line, all of that is forgotten. I was certain that I wouldn't make any mistakes, and I didn't think about it at all. Röhrl has demonstrated all again in 10 minutes, 47 seconds. A new record. In 1988, the Audi team returns to the USA. After his rally time, Walter is to present Audi to the Americans, together with his colleague Hans-Joachim Stuck. The goal was to make the brand Audi known in the USA, above all to show that with a 5-cylinder engine you can also beat the large V8 and V10 race cars. And to be able to do that in conjunction with a 4-wheel drive system in a relatively low displacement engine, that was our job, to show people what the Audi Quattro was all about. Believe me, after 2 years, they learned. The Audi team takes 8 victories in their first season. Commandingly, the Bavarian car maker wins the Manufacturers' Championship. And an American driver wins the driver's title for the Germans. Walter Röhrl's work, however, goes above and beyond. Walter was of course very important to Audi as he helped develop the entire Quattro technology. And finally, it made no difference if we were driving on gravel or asphalt. Walter also helped develop the Trans Am with the ISMA 90, for which he did most of the work, since he was unbelievably knowledgeable with all the transmission ratios, what percentage in front, how much in back, which damper, which springs, and I also learned a lot from Walter. That was already the time, thank God, when there were so-called telemetry recordings from which I could see how he braked. He braked from the left to maintain the car's balance. From that I learned so much from Walter, and that's how I was able to adapt the car so quickly. He was of huge importance to our team. Circuit racing means hard fights and reckless driving, characteristics that Walter Röhrl does not like to use in order to win. I also don't like to go first. When 2 people want to go through a door, I let the other person pass. In racing, this is of course the wrong way. So I also did the exact opposite when I had to, as I was under pressure from the company. And I said, well, I trained in America often, and it was made clear that you have to be third or we won't be the champions. That's the way it was, that you would be third, and you drove the race that way. You kept going and became third. You did your job well. But you still expected someone to punch you when you got out of the car. But in America, it's different. They say, wow, very good job, fantastic. But I hate that. For me, it's rally driving, clean, alone, against the clock. The best man wins, not the one who's most brutal. What Walter doesn't love is the specialty of his colleague Hans-Joachim Stuck. He prefers the hard driving style and also has success with it in the Formula One. Other drivers, like the Belgian Jacky Ickx, are more contemplative due to the dangers.
Not everything is shining. You have good moments and dreadful moments. Yes, we are sitting today together, we speak about an era, everything was wonderful. No, it was wonderful certain days, dramatical other days. What makes you grow, it's also, and probably more, the bad experiences than the good ones. That change your style, that change your motivation, that change your way of seeing things.
Jackie's a wonderful person, really. We were both at Porsche for 11 years, and I really respected him, really liked him. I see him as a great friend, and he also has a great friend in me. I just like him. Jacky Ickx, one of the best all-round drivers of all time. He was born in Brussels in 1945 and competed in motorsport for an unbelievable 30 years in almost all classes. 6 times he won the 24-hour Le Mans race, and therefore became known as Monsieur Le Mans. His driving style adapts to the task at hand. He's a natural. And Jacky Ickx is a winning driver, by no means to be taken for granted. He's averse to rankings. He remains a loner with his Belgian bullheadedness. Stages of his career: Tyrrell, Ferrari, Branham, Ferrari again, McLaren, Lotus, Williams, Porsche. He doesn't collect revenue and has a very interesting way of seeing things. He always maintains a certain distance from the racing scene.
There were a lot of freedom and a lot of, in a way, amateur style. The name professional was not the name adapted to us in those days. Why? Because the basic idea was just to drive. The money was not important, and there were no money. The basic idea was to win races.
And Le Mans is his race. His partner, Jochen Mass, stays on the outside. He doesn't want to take part in the classic. He would rather film it. The risks are too great. I always told Porsche I would like, of course, to drive all races with Jacky, just not Le Mans. I didn't want to drive in Le Mans. I could have won the entire race with Jacky, but I did it out of principle and out of safety concerns.
He missed the possibilities of a number of wins at Le Mans because he felt uncomfortable, and you have to respect that.
Ickx, on the other hand, is in his element, the victory firmly in sight. But a malfunction during the beginning of the race looks to already be the end.
I was out of the race due to a broken engine after 3 hours.
But Ickx doesn't want to simply give up the race. He steps into the second car, more or less not standing a chance.
Even if it looks a total disaster, you may win.
The Belgian laid it all on the line and chose a brutal tactic.
We had the incredible chance to be able to race Le Mans for the first time as a Grand Prix. That means flat out. The remaining car was 41st, I would say, by memory.
To race at full throttle on such a track, an immense risk.
We had nothing to lose. Nobody had anything to lose.
The decision came overnight.
And in the morning, suddenly, you are alone in front.
And then the unthinkable happened.
We had to overdrive ourselves.
Jacky Ickx wins Le Mans.
Personally, I think I drove one of my best races in long distance.
Jochen Mass stands by his doubts, once again to take the risk, the incalculable.
You just had to be lucky, that's all.
And many didn't have that luck. Jochen Mass was among those who weren't willing to put too much on the line, and for good reason. And it happened at every race. At every race, a driver was killed. I looked around on Friday at the briefing and I thought, who is it this time? Hopefully not me. His career is almost at an end. And then there is the other side to racing that Maas and his friends love so much. To be the center of attention, to be idolized, to give all that up. They're racers out of passion in the big, beautiful world of motorsport.
If you are what you are, it's because you are surrounded by those incredible people who are passionate by motor racing. They have the right expertise, but you never see them. The drivers are underneath the headlights. They get all the glory, but you can't get the glory without these hundreds and hundreds of people who are working on a project.
The project is not yet over for Maas and Ickx. The German continues to drive the big important races for Porsche until the end of the 80s. They also take part in Paris-Dakar, where Maas survives a severe accident and asks himself, is it all worth it? But it was a very thin band that allowed me to survive that time. And I thought to myself, someone is trying to tell you something. Now pay some attention and quit this thing. Maas enters the sports car class for Mercedes. In 1989, the time has come. He drives Le Mans. And he wins the race that he had always shied away from. At the older racing age of 42. This has special significance for him. My father died when he was 42, and strangely I thought about that with 42, I had finally won the race that I had tried so many times to win. It was great. The African sun. That did it for Jacky Ickx. During the rally Paris-Dakar, the continent begins to fascinate him. All victories seem to be forgotten. A new perspective on life is opened after 30 years of race car driving.
I had a very good guardian angel. And at the end of my career, that guardian angel was very exhausted. He said, no, it's enough, because I give my best, now you have to give me some rest. And that's it, that was the end of it.
Jacky Ickx regularly visits African countries. He loves the people and the nature. He's found himself balance in the life of a racer.
The first 20 years, your view on the world roughly limited to motor racing. It's narrow. The third part of my life is the discovery of the African continent.
The hustle, speed, and glamour is in the past. What matters now? To get away.
For me, it's well behind me. It's another Jacky Ickx. When you reach the age of 70, you start to see the checkered flag. So you know that you have to enjoy every day of your life and take the best part of it.
Jacky Ickx is completely finished with the sport of racing. In fact, he doesn't even want to talk about it anymore, much in contrast to his fans, who will forever regard him as the legend of speed. An entire country weeps. Brazilians grieve the loss of someone who had given them hope. A race car driver, an idol, has died. Millions of people come to Sao Paulo to pay their respects to Ayrton Senna. The sport of auto racing has lost a champion.
It was just as emotional, unfortunately, I have to say, as all the others were.
The Formula One in the 1960s. It was mastered by one man, Jim Clark. To this day, the reserved Scot remains one of the best race car drivers of all time. He was born in 1936. He first took over his family's farm, but his talent quickly took him from being a hobby racer to a Formula One driver.
Jim Clark was very special. He was a country boy. He was a farmer, a sheep farmer. He didn't like all the hoo-ha surrounding. He was modest, and he's just remembered because he was such a fine gentleman, both off the track and on the track.
As if out of nowhere, Clark emerges onto the racing scene and is supported by a design engineer who builds particularly fast cars. His name? Colin Chapman. The success of the team begins already in 1963 with the celebration of their first World Championship. And that without any major sponsors or the normal karting career. His talent alone was enough to make a difference.
He drove in such an immaculate fashion that you never thought he would ever have an accident. He was the best racing driver to race against. He never cut you out. He never did the wrong thing. He was absolutely the etiquette of driving, the best.
Colin Chapman specializes in lightweight construction, which allows the race car to become faster and faster. The problem, the cars are not reliable.
I drove a Lotus, and I must admit that I had a number of technical problems, technical failure on it, for different kind of reasons, but the success of Jimmy was also due to the success of the Chapman at the time.
Chapman remains stubborn regarding his lightweight principle, and the victory with Clark justifies it.
I think Jimmy trusted Colin. They were a good combination. I mean, Jimmy was given all the best equipment, the best car, always the fastest. His teammates, just because Jim was such a good driver, his teammates hardly ever could compete with him.
In 1964, Jackie enters the world of Formula One. In his countrymen, he finds a role model and a friend. Together they share an apartment in London, which becomes referred to by their colleagues as the Scottish Embassy.
I learned a lot from Jim Clark. We were known as Batman and Robin, and there's no doubt who was Robin and who was Batman.
The British racing legend Jackie Stewart adopts the gentle driving style of his friend. His philosophy, less is more, and more reliable.
Most people overdrive. Most people try too hard. Most people bully the car because they think they have to drive faster. They think they have to be more aggressive. While, on the other hand, you don't get aggressive. The car is a delicate piece of engineering.
Stewart is humble, like Clark, though he's already suffered much humiliation in his life. It will affect him his whole life. He was raised in Scotland with a disability that made him an outsider.
When I went to school, there were unquestionably the most unhappy times of my life because I'm a severe dyslexic. Even today, I can't do the alphabet. I don't know it. Never been able to learn it. I don't even know the words of my own national anthem or the Lord's Prayer. I can't remember them. I can't work an iPod or an iPad. I use a mobile phone to make phone calls. I can't even find telephone numbers on it because I can't find my name on a keyboard, for example. So I'm a severe dyslexic.
He didn't even know what the disease was called. For many years, Stewart hid his ailment, as the fear of being ridiculed was great. He knows this still very well from his childhood.
You're just addressed as being stupid, dumb, and thick. And that's what the teacher tells you. And you believe it, because everybody else can do the things so easily that you can't do. Writing, spelling, reading. There was nobody to help Jackie Stewart when he was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up to I left school at 15. The moment I could get out, I was gone. A very bad time in my life.
His dyslexia is first diagnosed at the age of 41. But Stewart has another ability that sets him apart from the majority of drivers. His aptitude for concentration, precision, and focusing in on the moment. He first notices this in his youth while participating in a much different sport. Jackie Stewart begins clay pigeon shooting. He makes it to Great Britain's national championship.
And my shooting life changed my whole life because for the first time I was good at something.
Stewart combines the demands of both sports in a unique manner. This allows him to be superior to his competition. He wins races with his head rather than the gas pedal.
My shooting taught me a lot about racing. You know, it's a different sport, but shooting, you learn how to work your head, because if you shoot and you miss a target, the clay target, you never get it back. If I make a little error of judgment in a corner, I can make the time up, but in shooting, you never get it back. So I learned something called mind management. And most of my races I won in the first 5 laps because my head was cool, everybody else was uptight, I think, and I was able to do quite well.
Modesty and a clever driving style. His friend Jim Clark had inspired him. In 1965, Clark becomes a 2-time world champion. Clark and his team worked well together and were successful. The fans are at his feet. Nothing seems to be able to stop him. On top of that, he has a special power over women.
He was one of the cleverest guys I've ever met. He had a lot of girlfriends. And he was very shy, but the girls loved him. The great thing about Jim Clark, every single one of those girls thought they were the only one. It was wonderful.
But there are also setbacks, including a severe accident that leaves several dead. Clark takes a step back, but soon sets out on the attack with Lotus again. He wants also to show the USA how good he is. In 1965, he participates in the famous Indianapolis 500 and wins. Chapman and Clark dominate the scene. In 1967, hardly anyone believes that he will take a 3rd world championship. The new car is groundbreaking, but also unreliable. Win or break down. The two extremes create the first bouts of tension between the driver and the design engineer.
Colin Chapman,
I admired him on the one hand for his beautiful cars, But on the other hand, I also sometimes condemned him for the maneuvering of his cars at the limit, because he had a lot of drivers on his conscience. And that was at some point noticeable, that he was so brilliant on the one hand, but so nonchalant when it came to the life of his drivers. I made the decision, no matter what I drive, I'll never drive a Lotus.
Wenn du alles fährst, Lotus fährst du nie.
Jim Clark begins to question his future with Lotus. His loyalty to Chapman fades.
I think towards the very end of his career, he was beginning to realize the fragility of the Lotus in comparison to the BRM or the Ferrari or whatever else was around. And I think Jimmy by then was beginning to think, I need to go somewhere else. But that, of course, never happened.
Hockenheimring, April 7th, 1968. A cold and wet day. At the request of Chapman, Clark competes in a Formula 2 race. It doesn't count towards the World Championship, but the small team needs the entry fee. The route hasn't changed, but the cars have become much faster.
We were racing on the same racetracks with little or no protection, no runoff areas, no deformable structures, no barriers, nothing. Trees, we could be hitting anything.
These are the last pictures of Jim Clark.
It was in the fifth lap that something went wrong. Clark's car had not reappeared in front of the timekeeper.
At over 200 kilometers per hour, Jim Clark lost control of his car. He sped off into the forest virtually without braking. Help arrived too late. Clark died at the site of the crash. Today, a memorial lies on the side of the route in remembrance of the Brit. Deaths were not uncommon during this time, and the fate of Jim Clark showed that no one is safe in this sport.
We haven't seen another Jim Clark, but he was a very special man. When Jim Clark died, I think all of us thought, my God, if Jim Clark gets killed, we could all be killed. His accident, for me, for sure, was mechanical.
For Jackie Stewart, the memories of his friend are a crucial turning point in his life. He reevaluates things. Epic victories. The love of racing on one side. The dark side of the sport on the other. Personal tragedies always leave their mark on you, and he was strongly affected by what was close to him in life, like the death of Jimmy Clark.
When Jim Clark died, that was a wake-up call, I think, to us all, and it was then that I started my interest in motorsport, safety.
The death of Jim Clark marks the beginning of a dark period.
Mike Spence died the same weekend, a month later. Ludovico Scarfiotti did the same. He died in the same weekend in June, and Joe Slesser died at the French Grand Prix in July. We had a series of fatalities, and safety was a disaster, and things had to change.
But it's not only the Formula One cars that are causing problems. The routes are no longer suitable for the ever faster cars. Whereas today there are wide gravel beds, at that time, strips of grass only a few meters wide serve as runoff areas. Trees, gravel, and bales of straw mark the finish line. Safety takes a back seat. Even medical care, in the event of an accident, is not a guarantee.
What changed Jackie Stewart's philosophy is definitely the fact that he had an accident in Francorchamps where he went off the track in a very high-speed corner, and I think he really felt like a survivor. He was extremely lucky.
I knocked a woodcutter's hut down. I did a huge amount of damage. The car was written off, and I survived it, fortunately. But there was no medical help. There weren't any medical people there. There was no marshals there to help me. Graham Hill and Bob Bondurant took me out of the car, laid me in the back of a hay truck, and couldn't find an ambulance. It took them more than 45 minutes to have an ambulance come and take me away. Took me to a medical centre, it was called. I was put on the floor and there were cigarettes everywhere. I remember seeing the cigarettes, you know, used cigarettes. And that was the medical centre. And Jim Clark, Helen and Louis Stanley, who was running BRM at the time, they went with me to the hospital in the ambulance. We were led by a motorcycle escort. The motorcycle escort went away. The ambulance couldn't keep up and they lost the motorcycle escort. The ambulance driver did not know the way to the Liège hospital. It's a myriad of ridiculous inabilities. The system wasn't working.
The drivers begin to fight against the poor safety measures. Their union demands more and more improvements. At the head of the movement, Jackie Stewart. However, his safety campaign is not always met with support. Veterans of the sport view the danger aspect as the special appeal of the Formula One.
To go around a corner with no danger is like climbing a mountain with a safety net. To go around a corner when there is a danger, it makes it that much sharper. But you can't really suggest things should be more dangerous. But I'm lucky I was racing when they were, and that made it more rewarding, I suppose.
Stirling Moss believes that it was better when it was dangerous because people were more responsible. He's absolutely correct. But you can't depend on everybody being responsible. You can't account for a racing car having a mechanical failure, like Jochen Rindt was almost certainly a mechanical failure. So you've got to make the racetrack capable of surviving an accident.
Nurburgring Castle. It stands symbolic of the growing criticism. It is the landmark of the world-famous North Loop, which first opened in 1927 and still today is not much different from the original course. The stretch in the middle of the Eifel is surrounded by woods. The difference in elevations throughout the 20-kilometer-long course means variable weather conditions. It's been many years since a Formula One race was held here. The ring does not comply with modern requirements. It's too old. The demands of the late 1960s, however, did not give reason to shut down the course. The drivers loved the challenge. However, the risks were too great. Jackie Stewart gave the course its famous nickname.
Green Hell is the greatest racetrack in the world, the biggest challenge in the world, but it was hideously dangerous, incorrect.
The drivers give a set of conditions to those in charge. That should increase the chance of survival in an accident. They're profound reformations that the ring cannot carry out. The dispute between the Drivers' Association and the organizers escalates in 1970. Jackie Stewart sets an example at the Nurburgring.
They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't make one contribution. So I was the president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association at that time, and it was then very powerful. We stopped the Nürburgring.
We weren't all in agreement with what Jackie Stewart demanded. Basically, Jackie Stewart initiated what we have now, rather sterile routes. And that was not his intention, but that was the result of it, of the effort to create a fairly safe environment for race car drivers. There were actually quite a few against it, who said he was overdoing it. The race organizers respond with pressure on the driver and teams. The conditions Jackie Stewart demanded cost a lot of money. It threatened big losses. Stewart must also work at convincing people within his association. Drivers such as Jacky Ickx are not at all enthusiastic about the plans. The likable Belgian would be a two-time Formula One world champion runner-up. He celebrates his debut in 1966 at the Nurburgring. Ickx calculates his success and the risks associated with it.
It was a calculated risk, and also that was the wish of everyone.
The debate on safety gets more and more intense. Ickx and Jackie Stewart stand on opposite sides, almost irreconcilably. The Brit also has to take sharp criticism. A conflict is unavoidable. There were some drivers who absolutely did not share his view. Among them were Jacky Ickx, who saw the whole thing a bit heroically and wanted to see it as such. That was the difference in character between the two.
Jacky Ickx, for example, wasn't keen on, he would not have boycotted a race if it hadn't been the rest of the drivers. If the rest of the drivers didn't go, there was no race. So no good of Jacky being on his own. But Jacky at that time was against the movement of safety, or at least how we were dealing with it.
Probably there have been a lot of misunderstanding on that subject. Clearly, I'm one of the great admirers of what he did.
But Jacky and one or two other drivers, very few, Jacky was the best known one who would object to the movement, if you like, to push for safety.
I didn't share the way he managed it. You know, to cancel a race 2 days before the Grand Prix, or these things, I was not made for it.
What would have been your way to reach it?
Reach it? Tell an organizer 6 months or 9 months in advance, we have a number of problems with this race course, you have to change it. You do it, we come. You don't do it, we don't come.
It was a battle to get the other drivers to agree. Because they had contracts, and the teams would say, okay, if you don't have, I'll put another driver in your place. And the organisers were saying, well, if you don't want to race, that's fine with us, but don't come. There was all sorts of threats. But in fact, as a group, we stayed together. And we said, we're not going to the Nurburgring, because if we go to the Nurburgring with them saying we're doing nothing, we couldn't go to another racetrack and say, you must do this or that. Because they say, well, why should we do that when you're racing at the ring?
The association behind Stewart prevails, but the criticism surrounding the Nürburgring continues. The compromises that the driver and the organizer must consent to are not satisfactory to either party. In 1976, Niki Lauda has a severe crash on the course. The fate of the Nürburgring had already been sealed beforehand.
At
that time, the Nürburgring had a set of requirements from us drivers to improve the course over the next 3 years to make it more safe. 1976 was the last year of the 3. Only the cars were now so fast that we sat down together before the Nürburgring, and I said, to drive the Nürburgring today with these cars, that's pushing it. And then I had a bad accident. Not that that has anything to do with it directly, but that was the situation at the time. And the Nürburgring would anyway no longer be driven after the race, since the Nürburgring said themselves, there's nothing more that we can do to significantly improve the safety in the forest where the Nürburgring is. Therefore, it was already decided that that was the last year for the Nürburgring, and the race would then move to Hockenheim. The newspapers in Germany all wrote, Lauda killed the Nürburgring because of his accident. That wasn't true at all. I found it very unfortunate because I thought, when we have such a wonderful route, it should be the cars that are made to fit the routes, not the other way around.
Spa did the same thing. They thought they were bulletproof, but they wouldn't do anything, so we closed it. Now, that was while I was president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association. That was the only thing I could see that I could do, because we were having totally unnecessary deaths.
Unnecessary deaths. Colin Chapman dealt with the tragedies in the same manner as the majority of drivers at the time. Continue on. And Chapman had an up-and-coming top racer in his sights. Lotus discovers Jochen Rindt. The Austrian enjoys his pop star status in his hometown. Even in his early days with Cooper, his aspirations were clear: to become world champion.
Jochen was one of the best drivers in the world. He was a fantastic driver to race against, clean as can be, very good manners on the racetrack.
His switching to Lotus seems to be the right step. Colin Chapman made world champions, that he knew. However, the design engineer had only one priority.
Colin Chapman was brilliant at making it go fast, but almost fast under any circumstance.
In the paddock, it becomes clear Lotus wants to win at any cost.
Well, Jochen had the same opinion. He had to drive a Lotus because he wanted to win. It was the fastest car, but it was definitely a fragile car.
Wenn du Angst hast, brauchst nicht fahren.
If you're afraid, there's no need to drive. Or if you have the feeling that the car will be unsafe or is unsafe, you're not obliged to live as a guinea pig.
Als Versuchskanickel da auszuleben.
Die meisten sagen, ich gehe das Risiko
The
nicht ein.
majority don't take the risk. They prefer to live a normal life without any danger. Then there are the few who want to know exactly, how far can I go in my life, even with the risks? These are different kinds of people.
So, das sind schon andere Typen, sage ich jetzt mal.
Accidents with fatal outcomes, almost a normality during those years. After Jim Clark dies, another 9 Grand Prix drivers die within 2 years. Death is a constant companion.
You know, at that time we were losing a lot of drivers. So I think racing drivers at that time were of a different species, almost, emotionally. It was a period of the sport that was hideous, and we still loved the sport.
On the tracks, the drivers simply block out the risks they're taking. Jackie Stewart and Rindt quickly become friends. The Austrian too wants more safety.
He had view on the future of Formula One, like Jackie Stewart did. They went on very well. They were close together, they lived together in Switzerland, not far away, and they had the same philosophy.
Jochen Rindt marries the Finnish model Nina. In 1968, they welcome their daughter Natasha to the world. On the other side, the ever-visible danger.
We all drove through the flames. The flames weren't out. The fuel was running across the racetrack. It was on fire, so we had to drive through it. And you see the car and, you know, it's a bad mess. And the wives have to support each other when that happens.
A woman who marries such a man or gets to know him, they know essentially what kind of person he is. Nonetheless, Nina has only one wish, and she knows it's the one her husband cannot fulfill. It would be asking too much.
Nina's statement about, "I'd like you to retire," is a very natural statement of somebody she loves.
so einem zu verlangen,
To ask such a person to go back to normal life without danger
ohne Risiko, und
and to sit at home and play with the children and to abandon the job for the wife.
den Job aufzugeben.
For many people, it's the right thing and correct. But for the extreme people in this world, incomprehensible.
Unverständlich.
In 1970, Jochen Rindt's sporting career finally goes in the direction he had envisioned. Colin Chapman presents him with a new car. At the beginning of the season, however, there's first disillusionment. The new Lotus and Rindt. It's not love at first sight.
Jochen and Colin were having quite a fight at that time because Jochen wasn't pleased with the new car.
I'll race with the old car, the Lotus 49C, the one I drove in Monte Carlo, because the new car still has some issues where I'm not quite sure that I'll make it to the end. So instead I chose the safer car. After the Belgian Grand Prix in 1970, the bubble bursts. Finally, a victory. It's a title that he won't win again. And then comes Monza. September 5th, 1970. Saturday's final training session. It's 3:20 p.m. In the fifth round, Rindt suddenly loses control of the car at a speed of over 300 kilometers per hour. He has no chance. Jackie Stewart is there.
The human is an amazing animal, and I make no excuses that I was in tears before I got into the car. I went off and I did one flying lap and came back in. And there was no rage, there was no ridiculous bad feeling or, death wish or anything, nothing like that. When I drove the car, my mind was cold, and I did a very good lap. I was second on the grid. But when I got out the car, I was in tears again because I was amongst friends. She was fantastic. She behaved really well. She was very strong. She kept her emotions under control. Nina would have wanted to take the trophy, for Jochen. I don't think anyone else should have taken it. It certainly shouldn't have been Colin Chapman.
He deserved to receive the title of world champion. That was the way it had to be.
Motorsport, a high-risk sport that every driver has to adjust to. He must understand his car, for only he sits in the car. There are the different aids, the technology becomes more and more refined, but if man and machine don't understand one another, it doesn't work. That's how it was, and that's how it still is. Every round is always different. And you have to then adapt and also make note, oh, for this curve I have to drive in such and such a way, or I need this or the other car setting to be able to best drive the curve. And I have so many knobs and so many possibilities, and from that you can be at a great advantage. Jackie Stewart cannot read or write. However, he knows how to adjust the car like no other. Most of the time, it's only marginal adjustments. But the precision work of the engineers and the mechanics is also partly responsible for the success of the small Scot.
You make a car drivable. You don't want an enemy, you want a friend. You've got to be able to communicate with your engineers in those days, and even today, but also today with the help of telemetry and all the other things, electronic devices that exist.
I'm the only one driving the car, and sure, you have all the data and theory and so on, but I'm the only one who can definitively say what is truly the biggest problem that is hindering me from driving faster. And therefore, my assertions are also still very important to the team. For example, we have fast curves, and when I steer there, the car still drives straight, and it doesn't drive the curve like I want it to. And then I can tell that to the team, and they can adjust it over time. because maybe the slow curves are balanced well and the fast not. And that's something you can't necessarily adjust here with small tweaks. Rather, it's something the team in the factory must do, with larger car adjustments, structural adjustments, and then they can engineer it. The balancing act between high risk and more safety. How much danger belongs in the sport?
Ich will nicht, dass es gefährlich ist. Ich will ja nicht, dass da was passiert, um Gottes Willen.
I don't want it to be too dangerous. On the other hand, this component of risk is what made the Formula One legendary.
Der Mythos auch, der Formel 1.
If everything is too safe and too matter-of-fact, then it doesn't have the same appeal.
Hat es nicht mehr den gleichen Reiz.
The death of Jochen Rindt in Monza. It only confirms that which has long haunted Jackie Stewart. Is it all worth it? I should continue to bury friends, comfort the wives. As a two-time world champion, the Scot begins to question the point of it all. In the spring of 1973, Stewart mentally bids farewell to his profession.
I decided in April of '73 that I was going to retire at the end of the season. I didn't tell anybody, I didn't tell my wife. My logic was that it would not be appropriate to tell Helen I was going to retire because so many people had died, close friends. Her logic would have said, well, if you're going to retire, you retire now. Why are you going to continue? Because it was only April that I made a decision. I didn't want her to be thinking of the 10 green bottles sitting on the wall. You know, one falls, the next one falls, waiting for 10 to fall, if you like.
Team manager Ken Tyrrell is one of the few who know of Stewart's decision. He has only one request of his departing champion. The superstar is to teach everything to his colleague François Sévère. Stewart is to make a world champion out of the talented protégé. The farewell tour in 1973 coincides with the journey to a third world championship. With his Tyrrell, the fight for the title is decided early on. There, his departure from his sport already lies heavy on his mind. His last race of the season in the USA, his 100th Grand Prix. Jackie Stewart wants to give the win to his colleague Sévère and afterwards retire. However, things happen differently.
Jochen was one thing, but François Sévère, the day before was going to be my last race, died at Watkins Glen, got killed there. So therefore it wasn't as happy an ending as it could have been. It was obviously a tragic ending. I only told her, sadly, on the afternoon that François died, that I was no longer a racing driver. And I didn't do the Grand Prix the next day. Not because of fear or not because of anything other than in respect to François. I thought it wouldn't have been correct for the team to race, and it was much better to stop. So my 99 is almost better than 100 anyway.
With his 3 titles, Jackie Stewart goes down in motorsport history. The British racing legend leaves behind more than just a few titles. Against all odds, he has revolutionized the sport. It still remains dangerous after the Stewart era, but his efforts towards more safety have significantly influenced the Formula One.
Jackie Stewart did the start of changing the face of motor racing. Jackie Stewart definitely was the leader on that aspect. He made a lot of personal effort into it. And if safety is as safe as it is today, definitely they played a key role into it.
But there are also drivers who, with their hard style, search out that risk, such as the Canadian Gilles Villeneuve at the beginning of the 80s. Jochen, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about. Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Gilles, he was really a good friend. He was a fantastic person.
He was fast and furious.
Gilles Villeneuve begins his career in his hometown. Here he already evokes enthusiasm among the spectators with his wild driving style. Fearless and spectacular, not only in the race car.
He was like this in his life, you know, in normal life. He was unbelievable with the cars, with the boat, with the helicopter.
He came there and performed tricks with his helicopter, with his large Augusta. It couldn't go on like that without consequences. Villeneuve was born in 1950 in Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada. After first racing snowmobiles, he came to Formula racing.
Villeneuve is off in one. He is off in one. The ambulance is out on the track. I have no other information at the moment.
Again and again, he's involved in accidents. Some, it's a miracle he survives. When Ferrari brings the Canadian to the Premier class, Villeneuve draws his own unique conclusions from his experiences.
One day he told me, you know, Alain, in Formula One you cannot hurt yourself. Because in fact he had some unbelievable accident. He never hurt himself. And in the first season myself, second race, I had a scaphoid, you know, and I felt pain, you know. And as soon as you start to feel the pain somewhere, you realize that you can hurt yourself. You can be hurt, you know. We have seen a lot of accidents, but he thought himself that that could not happen.
At Ferrari, Villeneuve is still a legend today. Followers of the Scuderia worship him. He fits on the team. His driving style is full of passion for auto racing. The spectators love him.
A lot of really top-line journalists would say to you, who was the most exciting driver that there's ever been in Formula One? Gilles Villeneuve. But in fact, he didn't win that much. He was exciting to watch, spectacular. The grandstands loved him, the spectators loved him. The bank manager, not so much.
For Villeneuve, the only race that counts is the race he's currently racing. He's simply not made for the tactics that go along with the world champion title. He'd rather fall out in an attempt to win than to cross the finish line second.
And to finish first you must finish.
Wheel to wheel, relentless fighting, impressive drifts. Villeneuve encompasses all that the fans want from a driver. Never give up, even when you only have 3 wheels left, as happened to him in Holland in 1979.
I wanted to drive it round to the pits. Maybe we could get it fixed. It was only 3 wheels on the car. But Gilles was still thinking, I'll get back to the pits. Maybe we can get it fixed. So he drove from the heart, not from the head.
I liked him a lot because he was such a wild animal on the one side, but also very controlled and a free thinker in how he lived and how he came to races with his huge camper. We were also actually very good friends then, down in Monaco. Villeneuve and I, our families, wives and kids. In 1981, Villeneuve has competition from within his own team. Didier Pironi challenges him with enormous tasks that the Canadian often fails. Villeneuve became more and more dogged because Pironi was faster than him. So he started taking risks that were unforgivable. In Imola, it comes to the breaking point. Pironi overtakes Villeneuve at the end of the race. Beforehand, it had been agreed upon to in no way endanger a Ferrari victory.
He was so upset by what happened in Imola the race before with Didier Pironi and with the management of the Ferrari team, that without this story in Imola, I don't think he would have taken the risk he has taken in qualifying in Zolder.
Zolder. The Belgian Grand Prix 1982. Training ends in tragedy. Involved, the German Jochen Mass.
Ich sah ihn kommen hinter mir im Rückspiegel.
I saw him coming behind me in the rear-view mirror. I was in my cool-down lap. We had only one round with these qualifiers. They lasted for one round, no longer. And my round was over, and I already had holes in my tires. And so I drove already with caution. I drove then over this small crest, look in the rear-view mirror, and see a Ferrari approaching. I was in the middle and drove to the right, not lighting quick, rather shifted over to the right, so that the left lane would be free, and then it was indeed free. But he didn't know that exactly, and wanted to pass me on the right. And so, of course, he hit my car and flipped over the wheels. It was a light touch, it wasn't a crash of any form. He was catapulted by the tires, and then he flew out to the right. Then it ripped him out of the car as it landed back on its nose. It ripped him right along with the entire aluminum back plate with the seat. I stopped, of course, and ran over and looked at him wide-eyed. That was a terrible feeling, to be involved in the death of a friend. And a small sense of guilt still always creeps up. Should I have given him a sign? Should I have gone earlier? Should I have done this or that?
Hätte ich ihm Zeichen geben müssen, früher hätte ich das ja jedes machen müssen.
The events in Zolder haven't escaped Jochen Mass. Even more than 30 years later, he sometimes thinks back to that 8th of May, a day that also permanently affected his life. There are things where looking back on it is part of it. For a long time? It affects me still today. It's the unpleasant side of the racing sport, when you're involved in such things. You have to see how you come to terms with it. Of course, you're not only feeling bad on that day or the day after or the next week or the next year. It's something that's imprinted on your mind forever. The death of Gilles Villeneuve, it will always be associated with the name Jochen Mass. May 1994, Brazil. 12 years after the death of the last Grand Prix racer Riccardo Paletti, the country bids farewell to their national hero. Ayrton Senna crashes in Imola, and the call for more safety is unmistakable. How long do we still have to watch how they die? Let us prove our love for Senna. More safety for the race driver. God doesn't want them to die. Today it was Senna. Who will it be tomorrow? Let us take immediate action. For Jackie Stewart, the funeral service is an almost forgotten experience. It should be his last funeral, the last coffin carried of one of his racer friends. With the death of Ayrton Senna and the criticism of the Formula One that followed, from all over the world, radical changes came in effect. Finally.
It wasn't until Ayrton died that the real work was to start on revolutionising safety with Professor Watkins. And then, because of the position he had been given, he had the power to get to the Max Mosleys and the Bernie Ecclestons to categorically change the sport. And from that point on, the sport has become an example for the rest of the world. Nowadays, I feel that, you know, I'm glad that the normal circumstances would never allow a driver or a group of drivers to go through the same experiences that we did. But when you have to deal with the funeral or the aftermath of the accident with the girlfriend, the wife, the father or the mother at the track, then you have to go to the funeral, to their home after the burial or the cremation. And then, you know, that's a whole different experience. And I'm pleased that the drivers of today have had no experience of that.
Jackie Stewart and his wife once counted how many close friends they had lost to motorsport. It was 57.